and a very good morning, and welcome to the channel. In this week's video, we're going to be taking a look at how to repair, preserve and restore Victorian sandstone. Now here's an example of what can be achieved by removing the stone, recutting the face of it and then putting it back in. These pieces were actually reversed and recut and then refitted. We'll see now a piece that we had to completely make from scratch to replace an extremely eroded piece of stone. This is salvage stone, not new. When it comes to sandstone, it can do two things really. It can delaminate, as you can see here, or it can erode. Either way, it'll either have to be replaced, recut, or refaced. This particular piece was a stone louver in a church belfry that we had to replace. Now, it was fresh from the quarry, but you don't always have to use new stone. You could use salvage stone. This particular piece here that you can see was badly eroded. Well, I replaced it by using a piece of salvage sandstone, which had been, I think it was a lintel above a window in a Victorian townhouse. Let's take a quick look at how we cut a piece of salvage stone. I'm using here what is known as a pitching chisel. A pitching chisel is going to basically split the stone. It's not going to cut it. You're not carving it. You're knocking chunks off with this tool. And it's by no means the tool you use for finishing the surface of the stone. This is boning out the stone. This is getting rid of the big chunks, getting rid of the waste. To start levelling the stone, or the surface of the stone, of course you need a different chisel. And for this we use what we call a raking chisel. The raking chisel isn't as, shall we say, vigorous as a pitching chisel. You're not going to be taking big chunks off it. You're just going to be taking a fine bit off that surface, just to try and level that surface out, get it a bit flatter before the next stage. This is the raking chisel, and as you can see, it's taking off tiny little bits. You're not taking off the big lumps anymore. We're just shaving a bit off the surface. Now we could keep doing this until we've got it fairly flat. Now you can work the stone to get it like this by purely using chisels, but this is quite time consuming. So we do cheat a little bit because of obviously time and cost of this repair. This particular piece of stone again was salvage stone. It was thick with white masonry paint. The raking chisel is just removing small amounts off the surface of the stone. You could continue doing this for quite some time and remove quite an amount of stone. However, this is very time consuming. And of course, as on a lot of the projects we do, we're against the clock. So we do have to cheat a little bit with this one. We could keep doing this and use other chisels on it to get it lovely and flat, smooth and square. But we don't, we cheat. And of course, a very important part when working stone is to keep checking that you're keeping it flat, keeping it square, etc. So a nice metal straight edge or a metal set square, as we have there, is an ideal tool for undertaking that particular part of the process. So enough chipping away with the old raking chisel there. Let's get on to the bit where we cheat. Here we're using a saw to cut off some of the excess stone. We could use the pitching chisel, but again, it takes a while and we need to cheat to speed up the process. There's no harm in using the old saw for removing the stone. It's not compromising the stone or anything like that. It's just speeding up the process. And I don't suppose it's really cheating, it's just doing it the modern way. Once you've cut through with your blade, you then need to remove the excess stone. This can be achieved again with your pitching chisel. You could use something like a bolster chisel or even a cold chisel, because that stone is now weakened and will break away quite easily. Not a lot of effort needed. However, where you've got the stone that's still attached that didn't come away with the old blade and pitching chisel method, you're going to have to remove that by hand. But again, there is an easy way to do that. You can cheat. Traditional ways obviously would be to just keep working the stone with chisels. This is how it had been done originally back in the Victorian era. This particular piece of salvage stone that I'm using is a bit of a wedge shape. Now, it was a windowsill. Now, this stone came out of this building itself. They'd bricked up a window around the back and taken out the old windowsill. That's what we're using. So how do I get rid of the tapered bit? How do I stop it being a wedge shape? Well, I've marked it out, obviously with a tape measure and a square and a pencil, and I've removed a section of it, as you can see there. You can see a piece still remaining on it. So how do we get rid of that lump of stone that's left on there? Well, we can get the old pitching chisel out again and the raking chisel and spend the next hour working the stone. Or we can cheat. And we can put a series of lines through that lump of stone. That will enable me to be able to break the stone away quite quickly, saving a lot of time. So yes, we're back with the old pitching chisel. But because we've cut the lines through the stone, you can see it's just flying off there nice and easily. So that's probably going to save me a couple of hours work. And once I've got rid of the big chunks, I then need to concentrate on getting rid of the little bits. And of course, when you're breaking stone away like this, you've got to be careful of your edges. You don't want to damage the edge. So work away from the edge itself, not towards the edge. If you work towards the edge, the chances are you're going to take a big chunk out of it. And once you've done that, that's it. The stone is skip fodder. So we've now swapped chisels and we're on the raking chisel, because this is a much finer tool. It's not going to be as damaging to the stone. But as you can see, it is still taking the stone off quite easily. This is down to the cuts that we've put through it. Now, don't be under any impression that this is easy to do. Far from it. You've got to know how to work those chisels. You're not just bashing away at it with a whacking great hammer and a chisel. You have to think where you're going to place the chisel, what angle it's going to be on, and how hard you're going to hit it. One wrong strike with that chisel and you've buggered up the stone. So remember, if you are going to have a go, do it on a few bits of practice stone first. Right, so we've got to that stage where it's all cut to the rough shape and size that we require. We need one of these. It's a cup disc. It's a few diamonds on a metal disc, which goes into the old angle grinder. Now, this particular disc is a 5-inch disc, which is bigger than the grinder normally takes. The grinder normally takes a 4-inch disc. Hence, we're not having a guard on it, so no complaints, please. I do know what I'm doing. But don't try this at home. You may lose a finger. So next, we're going to remove a lot of the stone surface very quickly with the old cup disc. Like I said earlier, we could do this with the old chisels, but that's probably going to take me the best part of the day, buggering about with chisels. This gadget may look a bit violent and damaging to a piece of soft stone like sandstone, but in the right hands, it really does speed up the job. So we've nearly got it to its shape and size. So now it's the fine adjustments, making sure it's square. So get the old square on there and you mark it up and then cut off any excess. And remember, measure twice, cut once. Because stone is expensive, and once you make a bad cut, it's buggered. Now we're cutting off the last of the excess stone and making sure that it's perfectly square and perfectly to size. This is the final stages of making this coin. We don't want to slip at all with the grinder. As before, using the old pitching chisel, we're going to break away that piece of stone. Not as easy as it looks, is it? But a few good taps and it'll go. You can actually hear when it's going to go, the tone of the chisel and hammer change. Very heavy stuff to work with is stone, so just mind those fingers when you're moving it about. So the last thing you want to do is drop it on your fingers. Believe me, I've done it. So we've reversed the stone, and what we're going to do now is put a cut through the opposing side. So we can break that off too. Now the reason we're doing this is because the stone needs cutting down to length. The next part of the process is to remove again the excess. This time, rather than using the pitching chisel, we're going to use the cup disc to remove that lump in the middle. Again, to save a little bit of time on the job. It really does speed things up and saves me masses of time and work. We're now getting near completion with this particular piece of stone. It's just a case now of keep checking it for flatness, squareness, and size. Once I've got it to a satisfactory state, shall we say, I then need to go over it with another type of disc. This is to take out any little imperfections that are left from the cup disc itself, because you'll always get marks from the cup disc, so you need a finer disc on it. We now need to change over the discs, and what we're going to put on the machine is a 40 grit flapper disc. You can pick these up from most of your DIY stores, etc., and they're a couple of pound each. What they are, I suppose, are like a harsh sanding disc, and it'll take all those imperfections out, like I say. Now, once you've used your flapper disc, you can go a step further, and you could use an orbital sander. But I don't think that's going to be necessary on this particular project. As I said earlier, the stonework's going to get painted when we're done, finished and gone. So when you're using your flapper disc, you want a sort of like a circular motion, so to speak. You don't want to hold it in one position too long, because you'll end up marking the stone. It will bite into the stone, because again, sandstone is quite a soft material and it's easily marked. So as you can see there, very gently, just round and round and round, just taking out any imperfections. And you're looking as you go. So if you see anything that's a little bit deep, you can work it out with that cup disc. And the end result is basically a lovely piece of flat, smooth stone. We're now at the stage where we need to make sure that the stone is to the right length, the right height. We need to make sure it's square. And we need to make sure that the surface is flat. This stone has to fit in between two other pieces of stone and next to the brickwork on the bay, because it is a corner coin. If I've cut it too long, obviously it's going to stand out from the rest of the stone. If it's not flat, it's going to stand out. And if it's not square, it's not going to sit correctly. And you'll be able to see it. It'll look a mess. So this stage, make sure with your square that everything is nice and square, nice and flat. And chuck your tape measure over it again, just to be double sure. Because once you pull that piece of stone up that scaffolding, the last thing you want to have to do is bring it all the way back down to trim it up. And there you have it. That's the piece of stone cut and ready for fitting. Now let's have a look at some pieces of stone we cut earlier. These have actually all been taken out, they've been turned round and been recut and then refitted. Let's have a look at this final piece that we've just cut. This is how it needs to look when you're finished. Don't forget, originally it was flush with the brick and stone, so it has to go back that way. Now this particular piece was really badly eroded, so we had to make a new one. We couldn't take this one out and reverse it. And hopefully that'll now last for another 150 years or so. Now one of the other ways that you can repair stone is to reface it. Now these examples here have all been refaced. They were quite badly eroded, so recutting was really out of the question. Refacing is a different set of skills, and you undertake this using lime mortars, earth pigments, and of course a bit of the old goat or horse hair in your mixture, just to give it a bit of strength. As you can see here, very, very badly eroded stone. That's just been refaced. That isn't new, it's not been recut or anything like that. It's just been faced up. And of course, one thing that you don't use is the old cement. This would be highly destructive to the stone. We always use the lime mortar because, of course, it's vapor permeable, it's breathable. Where cement isn't. Cement's going to hold moisture against that stone and slowly erode it away. Lime's better to work as well. It's a nicer material. You can form your shapes with it the same. It's a bit like working clay. This particular piece, I had to make up tooling to make the shapes. And I used some plastic piping, which I heated up till it had gone nice and floppy, then pushed it in to a piece that was the same shape. I then used it to run the new mortar. In turn, it gave me the shape you can see there. You can form all sorts of shapes with the lime mortar. Like I say, it's like working with clay at times. It's very workable in comparison to a cement-based mortar. This window frame here was early Victorian and in a bad state, but that was internally. So we completely refaced it with lime mortar. So you can pretty much repair any piece of stone, shape, size, etc. with the old lime mortar. You take this bay, for example, in a hell of a state, absolutely rotten. But we managed to get it back to some sense of normality. You see the mullions there were actually turned out to be timber and the bottoms were rotten. So we got those repaired for it too. But you can see that the horribly painted stone has now gone. Of course, this piece has lost all its features, but it's still strong. It's still stood there and it's going nowhere. Or at least, I hope not. No, it was solid. But we managed to recover it, again using the old lime mortar. This has been completely refaced and should last for a number of years. So you can pretty much reface any piece of stone, as long as you take your time and you've got obviously the right tools and the right skill set. Take this mullion. This had completely gone, but we managed to recover it. You can see the building in full. There it is. And you can see the mullion that is now fully repaired. Indeed, you can see all of the stonework that has been completely restored. Sometimes I come across stonework that really should be beyond facing up. But I'm up for a challenge. Take this piece, terribly eroded. And there you go. Now that's all handcrafted, that's not moulded or anything like that. That's basically just faced up with lime mortar. I do it using little clay working tools. This particular piece took me, I think it was about 6 days to fully reface. That included removing all of the rotten stone off the surface of it, putting a bit of binding agent onto it, priming it up with lime slurries, and then of course adding several layers of lime mortar to reproduce the shapes. And that was the end result there. As you can see, it looks a million times better than it did before we started to restore it. And this should last quite a few years. Here's another piece that's been refaced. So refacing can be quite intricate and quite time consuming. So never be under the impression that these jobs are quick and easy. They do take time. And you have to form things, patterns, shapes, all sorts, using little hand tools, little trowels, all sorts of things, bits of pipe, anything to make a shape. So we've had a look in this video how you can repair, preserve and restore Victorian stonework. We've looked at the 3 different methods. It may only be a little bit of line pointing that's required to the stonework, like in this church. So we've had a look at the 3 different options you have for repairing, preserving and restoring stonework. So from cutting and making new pieces, to refacing, to just recutting. We've covered it all. So hopefully you found this informative and it will help you with some of your own projects. By no means have I shown you everything about working with stone. Only partly shown you, because obviously to show you and teach you everything about stone would take me years, and that would be a long video. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's little tete-a-tete. So don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe, and we shall see you all next week for another episode of Buggering About with Old Buildings. See you next week. Thanks for watching.